Good morning, everybody, and good morning to those who are joining us virtually. We have this exciting session in which we have all of you wide awake, totally alert people here with us. I'm Nancy Seibel.
And I'm Heath Oellette.
All right. And we decided we'd start right on time at 8. So for those who are here in the room, people will be coming in and joining us. And we'll welcome them and let them sit beside us and all of that. And we will, as we go along, be wanting, we set this up so that there would be time for us to engage and exchange and ask questions and disagree and do all those things. So to facilitate everybody's participation, we're going to bring you a mic when you have something you want to say, and Melissa's going to help with that. Thank you, Melissa, for helping with that. We're going to take comments and questions from our virtual audience. So I know that I saw the screen and I see that you're already interacting and chatting with each other, those who are joining us online. So please continue to do that. And when you have questions you want to address to Heath and I or to your other participants in the audience, please type them in, and Donna will make sure that we hear your comments and questions. Okay. So as you're joining us, just find your seat. There's plenty up front, and we won't make you do anything unusual if you sit up front near us. How many here are presenters and do trainings? Okay, so you're aware of this challenge of we have a long, narrow room for those who are not right here in the room, and that we were talking about it would be nice if we had an automatically swiveling platform that would help us turn and make eye contact with everyone. But we are all going to help each other so that if for some reason my attention's in one direction or Heath's is in another and we don't see that you want to say something, please just help us out and let us point out that we need to pay attention to all sections of the room. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started then. And I just wanted to start out with Heath and I giving you a little bit more introductions, and then we have some quick show of hand questions for you. And I know if you're joining us virtually, you can't exactly show your hands, but you can certainly type in yes, and Donna can kind of let us know what the responses are if you're wanting to say yes as a virtual way of raising your hand. Okay. So my name is Nancy Seibel, and I live near here. I live in Catonsville, Maryland, which is close to Baltimore. And I'm the owner and principal at Keys to Change, and that is a practice that offers consulting, early childhood consulting to early Head Start and other early care and education programs, as well as other early childhood programs. And I also offer coaching to human service professionals and small business owners. And prior to launching Keys to Change about 1.5 years ago, I was with 0 to 3 for 14 years and did some other stuff before that. But my professional background is in counseling, and I've worked for many years before joining 0 to 3 in programs serving young children and their families.
My name is Heath Oellette. I'm currently the Director of Children's Services at Community Concepts. Community Concepts is in Western Maine, and we cover much of the border of New Hampshire. And so for those of you who are familiar with Maine, this is primarily the skiing areas, Sunday River and Sugarloaf. In addition, I live in Portland, Maine. I've been with Community Concepts for just 2 years, like probably yesterday. Prior to that, I worked for both NAYC and for 0 to 3. And then before that, I was working in a Head Start program, and I've done everything from a teacher to a family service advocate, site manager, and I was a program manager as well. So I want to welcome you all, and I hope that you find this session today fruitful.
Okay, so the questions I thought I would ask, we'll warm up with an easy one. So how many here and how many who are joining us online are morning people? Good, I'm glad you're here. We need you. You're alert, you have energy, and if something starts to falter or get a little funny, you're going to help us, right? Okay, so great. How many are not so much morning people? Okay, unfortunately, I'm with this group. What are we hearing from the virtual audience, Donna? Any responses?
It looks like we have a lot of morning people.
Okay, that's very good too, because we know you're going to stay on target and focused and help us with your comments and questions and insights. So I'm glad we have so many morning people. I get up pretty much every day around 6 or 6:30, but I think I really wake up fully around 10, which is a little after we're done today. So we'll see how this all goes. Okay, so how many here are involved with supervision and reflective supervision in some way? Okay. All right, and in the audience in front of us, a great many people put up their hands. It looked like about 2/3 of the group at least. And Donna, what did we see from our online participants?
About half and half right now.
Okay, all right, very good. And how many are involved in some way in early childhood coaching? There's plenty of seats up here if you're just coming in. Okay, so we have a little bit fewer, but still a significant number of people in this room are involved in coaching in some way. It looked like about half the room. And did it look that way, Donna, with our virtual audience?
I think they're still typing.
Okay, well, I know it takes a little longer to type a response in than it does to raise your hand, and so we'll get your feedback in a second. Okay, so I have a couple of other questions. There's nothing hard here. Okay. So how many, when you think about reflective supervision and early childhood coaching, think that they're kind of the same thing, we just happen to use different terms for them? Okay. So no one put their hand up for that here. Oh, you did. A few people did. It's hard when nobody else does and you're thinking, well, maybe I think this. But you know what? We're really nice people in here, right? No one's going to get all judgy on you if they don't agree with you, or, so it's okay to say what you think, and it's okay to ask questions or disagree with anything Heath or I say too, as long as you're nice about it. Okay. And did anyone respond to that one, Donna, in the virtual group? Did you lose track?
Yeah.
Okay. I talked too long.
I was reading the responses and forgot the question.
I just was curious how many thought reflective supervision and early childhood coaching might possibly be the same thing.
No, they're definitely, they know the difference.
Okay, excellent. That's good, because it'll be really interesting. We're certainly going to be sharing some thoughts about that, and it'll be really interesting to have those thoughts added to with your experiences and thoughts. And so how many then, we can kind of guess what the response is going to be, think that reflective supervision and early childhood coaching are pretty much distinct from each other, even though there may be some commonalities between them? Okay. And so we're getting, looks like close to a half of the audience in the room here thinks that that's the case. And Donna, did you see any response, or are people still working on?
They think it's different.
Okay. And how many really aren't all that sure, and that's why you got up to come to this session? Okay. And that's all right. Actually, I'm glad, because that was the whole reason why we got up and came here too, is we kind of thought that there were some questions about that, and that maybe a chance to talk together this morning would get us on the road to getting some of that clarified. So we're going to start from the places we're all in today and then see where we get by the end. We will certainly be working together to look at the distinctions between reflective supervision and early childhood coaching, as well as the commonalities. We will also look at what their central purpose is, and at least we'll put out our thoughts about that, and we'll hear back what your thoughts are. I will foreshadow by saying that there is no one right accepted answer to all these questions we have. And there is no one right definition out there. So I didn't come with that magic, but I did come with some thoughts about it. And I think we'll get to a much clearer place by the end of the day today. We're also going to talk about how to go about developing a shared understanding of reflective supervision and coaching, should you be in the position of implementing one or both of these approaches to supporting staff in your program. And I think you can use the ideas whether you're about to launch this process or whether you're already involved in it and would like to take a step back to look at that shared understanding. So how we're going to go about this is the first thing we're going to do is have what we thought we would call a press conference. And the press conference is going to be led by Heath and I. I'm going to ask him some questions, and he's going to use those questions to share his experiences and stories about implementing reflective supervision at his early Head Start program. I've had the pleasure and opportunity to be able to be involved to some extent with that and helping support that activity at Heath's invitation. So he's going to share that and then take your questions and your comments. So let's talk about how to go ahead and ask some powerful questions, which you can use when you're speaking with Heath, and you can also use when you're back at your program and doing your supervision or coaching work, because I think powerful questions are useful in both of those instances. And for anyone who's just arriving, there are many seats, and please make yourself comfortable. If you sit near us, we won't make you get up and present. It's okay. It's safe. And there are seats right in front of us as well. So let's just talk for a minute about what this idea of powerful questions is. Powerful questions is a term that comes from coaching, and it's sort of, when someone asks you a question and you kind of stop in your tracks and you're like, oh, wow, that's a really good question. They're the ones that make you stop and think like that. And powerful questions help us with our understanding. They help us learn. They help us generate alternatives. And they help us explore our thoughts and beliefs. And as you might imagine, they tend to be open-ended questions. So an example of a question that might help with clarifying could be, you might start with saying, let me see if I understand. Are you saying you think reflective supervision and early childhood coaching are different? Okay, that could be an example of a clarifying question. When we want to use a question that promotes reflection on our actions or encourage learning, an example of a question we could use would be, what did you try? What do you know now? And these questions with several examples are in one of the handouts we uploaded, which I know you can all see this perfectly. It looks a lot like what's on the screen over there, and will allow you, just give you some ideas about how you might frame these kinds of questions. To generate alternatives, you're really encouraging people to brainstorm, and you might ask things like, well, let's see if we can think of 5 other ways to do that. Can you think of 5 other ways, and just see where that leads? And then probing questions really get into, what do we think and believe? So what's your current understanding of? And that could prompt someone to explore those things. So I'm going to encourage you to use this guide to asking powerful questions if you're putting forth any questions a day, but certainly after the press conference, and also to take it back and use it in your practice. Okay? Any questions or comments? Okay. So just another tip in this might be to think about, when you're asking powerful questions, where are you coming from? And using an attitude of, or having an attitude of curiosity, interest, openness, sort of puts you in a place where the other person is going to feel very safe and very listened to, where there's very little struggle on making themselves clear. Using open-ended questions, and we probably all know what those are. Those are the questions you can't answer with a one word or a yes or a no, but really causes you to have to think, well, what do I really think about this, and what do I want to say? So with that, let's go ahead and start our press conference. Okay. I think we might have to share the mic if you want me to ask you the questions.
I think that mic works on the podium.
Oh, we have a mic here? Okay. Everyone can hear? Okay, now it's really hard to turn my head. Okay. All right, so our first question, Heath, is what were the reasons that you had for wanting to implement reflective supervision and coaching in your program?
Sure. So let me just begin. I mentioned in the introduction that I've been with Community Concepts for 2 years, and I just want to tell you a little bit about our program first. We serve and work with about 600 children and families. So in Maine, we're actually the largest early Head Start and Head Start program, but nationally, that's probably more on the average size of a program or on the low side. Out of the 600, we work with just over 200 infants and toddlers, and that's in a mix of center-based and home visiting. And then just under 400 preschool children, and we offer that through the combination option, the center-based option, and then we have a number of pre-kindergarten collaborations. So when I came to Community Concepts, I had my own past experiences, particularly with reflective supervision. Both when I began my career, I had the opportunity to be involved in a program who really practiced reflective supervision. And it's something that personally I really valued and bought into. And when I joined 0 to 3, I also had an opportunity to have an amazing supervisor who really practiced what I consider true reflective supervision with me. In addition, I had been involved in some work, a pilot program for a literacy project around coaching. So this was a coaching model that was very specific to this literacy program. And I had the opportunity to really see the impact that this had on our classroom teachers in particular. I saw how they gained in their skills, in their knowledge. But most importantly for me, what I saw is their passion for the work. They really had adopted the program and became advocates for the program that they were learning about through the coaching model. Specific for reflective supervision, one thing that I want to say is our work is about relationships. It's about relationships with each other, relationships with families, relationships with children. And it's challenging, and it's hard. We all have our examples. Just the other day, a home visitor came back from our first home visit with a family. We had learned through the enrollment process that Dad was not living in the household, and actually Mom had a restraining order on Dad. However, when she showed up to do her first home visit, Dad was in the home. That's an example of the difficult situations that we face. Or the family that you visit their home and there's no furniture. Again, just the other day in my program, we had someone, a mom who showed up at the center who was exhibiting behavior and her breath smelled like she had been drinking. And our staff person had to try to refuse allowing her to take her child and to call someone else on the list. So, I don't share these examples to be a Debbie Downer, but I share them because this is real life. These are the experiences that we all face in the room. And it's what makes our work hard. And we also come to our work with our own experiences, our own past, whether that's about how we were brought up ourselves, whether that's about how we work with our own children, whether that's our past history that we bring to the table. And we can't just all of a sudden put that aside and show up and do our job. We bring those experiences to our work. And so in true self-reflective supervision, you're able to explore these things. And that's what Nancy's going to talk about in a little bit. The other thing in particular with Community Concepts, they had a system for doing monthly supervision with each employee. But the system was really about checking the boxes. It was about, did you get this done? Did you get that done? Did you do this? And what Nancy will describe in a little bit are really those administrative tasks around being a supervisor or being a supervisee. However, staff were really asking for a little bit more. They were saying, we want to spend a little bit more time really talking about what the work is really like. We really want to have an opportunity to explore this one-on-one with our supervisor. And so that was an important aspect for our program in really thinking about bringing reflective supervision to the program. For coaching, I had done some work with NAYC around We had done some focus groups. It was actually particularly it was focused on working with coaches and their own professional development. But through that, there's a lot of research about the effectiveness of coaching, about how we can all attend a training, and the likelihood of us being able to go back and implement our learning is less likely versus if we go to a training and then have coaching thereafter. We're much more likely to implement the practices and the knowledge that we learned. Our program really spent some time thinking about how to move out of being constantly reactive and how to think about being proactive in our work. And so we had a management team who was primarily focused on being reactive. That was something that they identified. And we talked a lot about how we wanted to promote leadership. We wanted to empower our staff so that they could make decisions on their own while doing the work, so that the difficult situations that I just described, that the staff didn't feel like they had to immediately call their supervisor and say, what do I do in this situation? This mom's right in front of me. But versus really helping staff to build those skills, build their self-esteem so that they can feel competent and feel like they know how to approach the work. And so overall, our program, we felt like we were doing really well. We had passed federal reviews. Our class scores for our preschool classrooms were in the middle range, but we really wanted to move ourselves up to the next level. And that's why we really thought about implementing coaching.
So I noticed a lot of nods and responses as Heath was talking about his experiences, and particularly the experiences people have when they go out to work with families. And also these, questions and challenges about how best to support staff's learning and ability to handle the intense interpersonal nature of the work. So did anyone have anything come up that you wanted to comment on or ask about at this point? And that's, Don, if there's anything there, let us know from coming in from the virtual audience. Okay?
Feel free to raise your hand so we can bring the mic to you.
Which I know that's what you're looking forward to. But absolutely, we're looking forward to your feedback. And I just want to take a second to pause to see if anyone had any now. And if not, we can certainly... Oh, yes, we do. Okay, see, I needed your help. Thank you. And you're right close to me, too.
When you gave the example of talking about when the mother came into the program and she smelled as if she had was intoxicated. I've had that similar experience and have staff that had to deal with that. How do you address it and keep your staff safe in the process of it? Because it can escalate when you approach that parent and your main concern is the safety of the child. How do you assure your staff that they're going to be okay and that remind them that we're here for the safety of the children?
So fortunately, this is something that our program has talked about extensively when we developed our policy around releasing children. In the state of Maine, you cannot withhold releasing a child to their legal guardian or to their parent, but there are things that we can do to try to avoid that. Having a conversation with mom. Mom disagreed with the staff person's opinion, but the staff person remained calm and actually handled the situation professionally. And asked if we could just call grandma in this situation. And mom was actually willing to do that. So I've been a part of a situation that hasn't gone quite so well. And in that situation, we really talk about staff keeping themselves safe because they have other children to take care of as well at that time. And if they're involved in an escalation with a parent, then are they able to really care for the other children in the classroom as well? And at that point, 911 is available. And again, if you can't refuse access to a parent, but you can certainly try to have a conversation with them and discuss alternatives. Our program also, not our program, my past program that I worked for, we offered to get a taxi because we were in a community that had taxis available. Where my program is now in Western Maine, we don't have taxis available on a 5 minutes notice. And what I'll share is, unfortunately for this mom, and what we found out thereafter, the next day when grandma came to pick up again, mom had actually been arrested the night before because she was drinking and driving, and the child was in the car. And this is real life. This is what we face.
And those are the kinds of things that worry us, right? And I think it's a great example, thank you for that question, because it's a great example of how reflective supervision can really make a difference. It's a place to come to when you've had that experience, and also a place to help you prepare should it come up. Because I know one of the big things in any kind of crisis like that is, I don't know what happens to you, but my heart starts to pound, and I'm not so sure I can think clearly, but if I've had a chance to prepare ahead of time, I have something to go to, and even maybe I've learned some strategies how to self-calm and self-regulate in that difficult situation. So that's a great question. Thanks.
Nancy, I'll just add that, these are the things that we face every day that we need to spend some time debriefing. Mm-hmm. We need to spend some time thinking about, okay, what is it that I bring to the table in this situation? Mm-hmm. Do I have a past experience? Maybe I grew up in an alcoholic household. Mm-hmm. Maybe I have my own experiences with alcohol. Whatever it might be, these are the things that we bring to the work that make it often challenging.
That's right. That's right. So, Donna, were there any questions or comments that you wanted us to know of?
Not at this time. We're just carrying on a conversation about resources in different states.
That's excellent. So I'm really glad that the chat feature is available to help people connect who are connecting with this virtually, and just want to reassure you, we also want to hear directly from you should you have questions specific to the entire group or to Heath or I. So let's go on to our next question. I think that really provided us with some thinking behind why we might want to introduce either reflective supervision or coaching, or as in Heath's case, both, to our programs, and things that we all really could connect to and resonate to. So the next question is, what was the implementation and design process like as you move forward with this?
Sure. So as I mentioned, our team, primarily our management team, really spent a lot of time really thinking about how can we move from being reactive 100% of the time, which is how our team felt, to being more proactive. And what we did is we made the decision to shift some resources. And so I mentioned that each of, primarily all the program managers, had some responsibility to supervision. And what we did is we almost split the team in half and dedicated half of our team to really supporting staff in the supervision model and in their work. And the other half of our management team, we decided that they would really primarily focus on the systems development as well as coaching. So that was one of the first steps that we took. Initially, we thought we could get up and running primarily with our coaching model within 3 months. I'll share a little bit that if you're going to adopt a coaching model, you may want to take a little bit more time in your planning. But we began determining where we were, where we wanted to be. Nancy worked with us and really actually began with us by an activity of thinking about where we were a year ago, where we were in the moment, and where we wanted to be as a program down the road. And that really helped us think about how did we want to get to the place that we wanted to be. We spent a lot of time talking about the differences between supervision, reflective supervision, coaching, as well as providing technical assistance and or training support to our staff. Or with our staff. And we actually came to a place of defining those, because as a full management team, we wanted to be on the same page, and we wanted to be able to share the information with our teachers, with our home visitors, with our family service advocates about what we believe the differences were. We used and looked up many different definitions that are out there and pulled from each of them to come to some consensus around what we believed the differences were, so again, so that we could all be on the same page. We spent some time really thinking about documentation. how we wanted to document both our reflective supervision practices as well as coaching, so that we had something that we could reflect upon in our work, as well as that teachers or home visitors had something that they could also reflect upon in writing. The other couple of things that we spent a lot of time on was thinking about boundaries, thinking about the different relationships that would be formed between a supervisee and a supervisor, as well as between a coach and a coachee, and really talking about what the boundaries might be. We talked about, would the coach communicate with the supervisor directly or not, because we wanted to share that information up front and vice versa, and came to some decisions that we thought would really apply to us. And one of the important ones was that we would not set up a system where the coach and the supervisor always kept in contact with each other, that we'd actually encourage the employee to be sharing the information and empower them to be the party who could share their experiences with their coach, with their supervisor, and if they wanted to share their experiences with their supervisor that they were having with their supervisor, that they would be the party to share that with their coach. And we, in that model, we really wanted to empower the teacher, the home visitor, etc. And then the next phase was to begin a pilot. And that's where we're at. We're getting ready to start the new year and looking forward to full implementation.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Heath one more question, and after that one we'll stop to see what your thoughts and comments are. So you just described having the supervisor and the coach and having to make some decisions about how each of them gets information and who brings that information to them. And it kind of brings up the question, did you think about having the supervisors also be the coaches, or how did you come up with this, this arrangement?
So I want to start off by saying there's not a right answer to this question, and and in the field there's actually many different beliefs or philosophical beliefs about this. I've talked with people who really believe strongly that they should be separate roles, that the person providing supervision and reflective supervision should be very different than the person who is providing coaching support. And then there are other people who really believe that you can blend them, and that works as well. Personally, for me and for our program, we really talked about the concept of, could one day you really be wear, the green hat and be the supervisor, and the next day could you wear the brown hat and be the coach? And we really talked about that as a management team. We weren't sure that we could really wear the multiple hats and be as effective as possible. But again, there's no right answer. There are some programs that I've learned about that have been rather successful, that the supervisor can also be that coach or that mentor. And then there are other programs who really believe they should be separated.
Okay. So any thoughts or questions? Yes, there's a question right behind you, Melissa. There may have been questions here. See, I had my head turned this way this time. But you'll get your chance. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to know, when you're looking at coaching and supervising, do you have to do both, or can you just do one or the other, reflective supervision or coaching, or do you have to do both?
You certainly do not have to do both. As Nancy will share in a few minutes, really thinking about the different priorities of doing one or the other. And actually, in my lessons learned, I'll share that our experience was we probably should not have tried to start both reflective supervision and coaching at the same time. That it was taking on a bit too much, and it actually was confusing our field staff about, wait a minute here, what's happening? It's so much change, and who's doing what now? And that we would have been better off at least starting with one, getting that established, getting the routine happening before we started the second. But you do not have to.
Okay. Thank you for that question. There's one right here.
Thank you. I was just curious if you can talk to us a little bit about how it would look if it would be the same person doing the coaching and the supervising. I'm curious how that would work.
So I will honestly say that I don't have experience in this area where the person is doing both roles. But I've asked a lot of questions of people who are doing it. And what they really talk about is having an open relationship with their employee. In a true self-reflective model, you're not necessarily judging the employee. You're really helping them to self-reflect on the work. And in a coaching model, you're really trying to lift them up and promote their knowledge or their skills, which sometimes as a supervisor, we're focusing in on that as well. And they really figure out how to blend the two, but I don't have personal experience in that area. For me, what I'll say is, at the end of the day, the supervisor is the one who is evaluating the employee. They are the party who is going to write that appraisal. And that was another thing that we personally talked about, why we wanted to keep it separate from the coaching, because there is something about, for many of, when we talked with many of our teachers, home visitors, that they wanted somebody that they could talk to in an open way that at the end of the day would not be writing their evaluation.
Donna?
Yes, I have two questions, and I believe they're both for Heath. So one is that she's curious, did managers providing reflective supervision receive reflective supervision?
So that's something that we're working on. We actually brought in Nancy to train all of our staff on the concept of reflective supervision and what it is that we're really talking about when we talk about reflective supervision and the difference between administrative supervision and reflective supervision. And our management team, we've spent a lot of time really talking about what this looks like for ourselves, because it's exactly, I think where the question's coming from is we need to model what we're going to practice with our staff. And it's something that in the day-to-day busy work, you can easily get caught up in those, did we check that checkbox? Did we get this done? Oh, here's what's coming up next. And if we truly value being more proactive than reactive, we as a management team also needed to practice that within our group.
Thank you. And the second question is, when you responded to the woman who asked about a situation with a parent who was under the influence, you offered advice on how your program handled the situation. Could you demonstrate how you would coach someone or offer reflective supervision around this or another issue?
So if we could hold on to that question, because towards the end of our presentation, Nancy and I actually have a role play scenario that we want to talk about with all of you.
Okay, and thank you for both comments and questions. And there's one more, and then we'll move on to our next question for Heath that I have. Okay.
In your program, do the coaches also do monitoring tools such as the class and Eckers, or do you have someone else who does that role?
So as far as monitoring goes overall, it's generally not the coaching role to do the monitoring. Primarily, it's the supervisor's responsibility to do monitoring, although we're overall a small program, and when you have to do the class score on over 24 classrooms, sometimes our coaches do get pulled in primarily to do class. But otherwise, we really try to keep and our monitoring with the supervision.
Okay, great questions. Sure.
Can I ask what your structure is? Who is it that's doing the coaching and who's doing the supervision? Are supervisors coaching someone else that they don't supervise, or what's that structure?
So we really keep them separate. So, for instance, we have a program manager for education and early intervention. She primarily focuses on our systems development, our forms, our policies, and she oversees and supervises a coach. Last year, we were having her try to do some coaching, and we really figured out that she could not, it was too much. And so for this coming year, we've hired a separate person to do coaching. And then on the flip side, we have a program manager who is also a program manager for early intervention education, but she oversees several of our sites. And we have that within all of our component areas, where we have someone who's more on the systems coaching side and someone who's more on the services supervision side.
Okay. So how did everyone react to all of this? This was a lot.
It was a lot. We really tried to approach it with an open mind, and one thing that I'll share in the lessons learned is we really figured out that it was a lot for staff, and staff were really hesitant, in particular about the coaching. We did not say coaching was about a particular project. Like we did not say coaching was about coaching for class or coaching was about this literacy program. We really wanted to approach coaching from a professional development standpoint and have the employees through the professional development plan identify coaching as one of the resources. But what we discovered is that staff, they themselves, we hadn't spent enough time really talking with staff about what was coaching, what would it be like. And so there was a lot of hesitancy at first. Like I said, we're through our first pilot, and we're really approaching this new year with full implementation, and we're looking forward to seeing how it works out this year.
So we'll come back and tell you. Okay. All right. And so Heath's been mentioning lessons learned, and I'd like to hear about those.
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
Should I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay.
So some lessons learned, creating buy-in. Creating buy-in with not only with the management team, but with teachers, with home visitors, about what are the benefits of having reflective supervision. Why do I want to move from checking the boxes to really opening myself up and exploring and being reflective upon the work and what I bring to the work? Why would I want to work with a coach? So really spending some time creating that buy-in. Give yourself some time both to get the programs up and working, or the models up and working, as well as to market it to your staff. And like I said, we thought we could get things up and going in 3 months, and really you should at least plan, in my opinion, at least a year before you can really think about getting that pilot up and going. Another thing is that not implementing both at the same time. So we've gone at them both at the same time and have found that it's really pulled us in different directions. And that in hindsight, we would have preferred to have started one first and practiced and used those skills and that model for a couple of years before we started the second. For us, we learned that it was best if coaches were not going to be assigned to other tasks. Again, it pulls you, right? The work demands that reactive work can always pull you. And in the coming year, primarily our coach for classrooms and for working around education is going to be a standalone person, and that will be their only role. Plan for support for coaches. So coaching in itself is not easy, just like being a supervisor is not easy. And we can list all the situations, all the circumstances that we'll face. And we really have learned that we needed to spend some time really helping our coaches prepare themselves for the work that they were going to be doing. Fortunately, we had the opportunity to work with Nancy, or Nancy worked with our coaches to really think through and spend some time coaching our coaches on what it would be like to do the work. Nancy, I don't know if we're on to the next slide or not, or if you're following, so I want to make sure that we...
I'm still on the same one, and it says link coaching to employee
All right, great. So yes, here, this was our model that we took away, that we really wanted staff to identify that coaching was one of those supports that they wanted for their own professional development. So in the coming year, as staff are developing their professional development plans, we're going to really promote that coaching is one of those options, one of those resources that they could list for whatever it might be that they want to work on as an employee. Moving on, just a couple other things. So early Head Start. So there's a lot of tools for Head Start. We focus on class. We're in the process of really thinking through what it is that we want to use, both with our home visitors as well as with our early Head Start classrooms. There are a variety of tools out there, and that's something that when you can have a tool like class, it's helpful and it's concrete. And both supervisors, supervisees, coaches have really said, hey, we would like a tool or a model to work off of. A couple other things that we learned is that the max that you really want to match a coach to a coachee, if you're going to really fully implement coaching, is 8 to 10 staff people. And that's the max that we have taken away from and that we're adopting for this coming year, is that one coach will work with 8 to 10 people in the coming year at any given time. And I just want to comment that we're not saying coaching has to be on a weekly basis. We're saying we want it to be at least one time per month, and what we're suggesting is at least 2 times per month, with that there's interaction between the coach and the coachee at least 2 times per month. On the reflective supervision side, what I'll say is we practice 1 time a month. But if your program has the ability to at least do 2 times a month, my experience from past working in a past program is that's a better model. A couple other things are determining the paperwork and the documentation. So you want to document the work that you're completing. And these were things that we spent some time really thinking through. How did we want to document it in a way that would feel safe, but would allow all parties to reflect back on the work? The communication chain, so I talked about this. What would the communication be between the employee, the supervisor, and the coach? And for our program, we chose to really empower the employee to take on communicating what was happening for them in their work with their supervisor and with their coach. And that although the supervisor and the coach will talk with each other, they try to avoid being the one who shares the immediate information and empower the employee to share the information. Pilot, so if you can pilot both self-reflective supervision as well as coaching with a few key staff, and then you can have the opportunity to learn how that worked before you implement program-wide. And lastly, I talked about this already, but give yourself more planning and startup time.
Well, we've already learned a lot, haven't we? And probably thinking about a lot. Let's see if we have time maybe for 1 or 2 questions at this point before we move forward to taking a closer look at the commonalities and distinctions between reflective supervision and coaching. So any questions here? Yes, I see hands, and the mic is on its way.
So what Nancy's not telling you is we're a little behind time, so that's why we'll take 1 or 2, and then maybe Nancy has a lot of information that we want her to be able to share as well, and some of your questions may be answered through that as well.
Could you discuss what kind of documentation was determined to feel safe? What was your conclusion?
Yep, so we talked about primarily in supervision that you didn't have to document everything that was said between the employee and the supervisor, but that you would document action steps, in particular the takeaways. Here's what we're agreeing as 2 people is going to happen next, or moving forward, or the lessons learned. Those takeaway items that would be important to be able to reflect back on. For coaching, similarly, that we actually wanted to empower employees to really be the ones to direct their own professional development and to say, yes, here's what I want to be working on. Yes, here's what I'm agreeing to be working on in the next 2 weeks before you come back and observe me in the classroom again.
Okay. So we had a number of questions over here, and then I think Donna has one too. Yeah, we'll give you a turn, Donna. Okay.
Considering that our programs are grant funded and are in, it's never for sure that our money's coming in, where are you guys finding the resources to come up with the money to hire coaches? For some programs, we might need to hire 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. For larger programs, you're looking at a large number of coaches. Mm-hmm. So how are you getting the resources, and why would a home visitor or a teacher say, yes, we should hire coaches rather than maybe giving ourselves a raise or something like that? Mm-hmm. It just seems like a poor use of money to me.
Yep. So as I mentioned, for us, we really spent a lot of time thinking about how we were constantly being reactive. And we wanted to shift some of our resources into being proactive. And the goal is that in 5 years, if our employees can have the opportunity to really explore their work and to gain more knowledge and to gain more skill and to gain more confidence in working with children and working with families, that then we wouldn't, hopefully the goal is that we're able to use less or have to have less resources in supervision and in checking those checking those boxes, and that we could really think about lifting our employees up. And our employees have said, we want the support, we need the help, this work is difficult. So for us, it did mean assigning more supervisors to one supervisee because we took those resources and put it into coaching. I don't have the results of that yet. We'll see where we're at in a couple of years to see if our goal is really achieved. But like I said, our staff are really saying we want some additional help, we want some additional support, and we really want to do better at our work. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, I really wanted employees to feel confident and comfortable in doing the work, that they didn't immediately need to feel like they had to call their supervisor to work through a situation, that they felt confident and skilled and that they had the knowledge to move forward and to take on the work themselves.
So really an important question for us all to think about. I'm going to take Donna in a second so that we can hear from others who are participating with us. But, those strategic decisions are tough decisions, as you're pointing out with your question. Donna?
The question is, how are teachers identified for coaching? They're wondering if in your program, Heath, if the preschool programs, if the teacher assistants also have the opportunity to receive coaching, or do coaches work with coaching teams? And then how often is the coaching done?
That's a lot of questions. Okay.
Trying to get them all in.
I know. Good, thank you.
So one thing I also want to comment on in the prior question is we have not had the resources that everyone can have a coach. Everyone does have a supervisor, but we don't have the resources that everyone has a coach. And our model is that right now, in the coming year, we have one coach who's going to work with 8 to 10 people. Now, that's not going to be a relationship that goes on forever. And so the goal is that over the course of 5 years, with that one coach, we may be able to reach as many as 50 of our employees. So to answer some of your questions, Donna, or from the folks who are online, so can you repeat them? I'm sorry.
Okay, how are teachers identified for coaching?
Yep.
And do the teacher assistants in your preschool program have the opportunity to receive? I think you answered that part. And how often is the coaching done?
Sure. So right now, the identification of coaching is primarily through the professional development plan. So when a supervisee and a supervisor sit down and develop that professional development plan, if they're working on a particular goal that they really want that additional help from a coach, then they're identifying that. Now, what I'll say is if we have 20 employees who identify that they want to coach in the coming year, but I only have one coach, we're going to have to take some steps to really think through how we might prioritize that. And we've really thought about readiness of the employee to take on the work because it's a commitment and it's agreement, and it's an agreement on behalf of the teacher, the home visitor, that they really want this and they really want to move forward. We are trying to adopt a model of at least once a month that the coach and the coachee meet, that there's some time for some observation, the coach to observe the coachee, and that they have some time one-on-one at least once a month. But our preference moving forward is preferably 2 times a month.
Okay, we have had, every question has been excellent, and I see that there's another one. Is it okay, can we move on? It's a burning question? Okay.
It's just that I wanted to share that we're doing the coaching and something new for us, and it's like a pilot in there, like you said.
Okay.
It's like a pilot, and I've been with the program 15 years, and at the time my title is Quality Assurance Coordinator. Well, this year when we started the season, they said now you're going to be also coaches, something brand new. And it's kind of hard. I've been a supervisor, but like I said, I'm a quality coordinator. So it's been kind of hard because I was used to monitoring and mentoring, and then to come into a classroom and sort of put the shades here so that I don't see anything except what the teacher is doing. But it's an experience. I'm enjoying it, but I want to learn more about it. That's why I'm here. But no, they didn't give us extra pay for that.
That's an absolutely that's an excellent lead into our next section, where Nancy's really going to explore a bit further about reflective supervision and coaching.
Yeah, so I know that there's lots of questions and discussion. I saw a lot of hands, and I'm excited about that. And for any that feel like, boy, we got to the whole end and we didn't get a chance to bring up our question, we'll be here for anyone who wants to stop for a few minutes afterwards. And you do in those slides, whether you already downloaded them or you're going to later, our contact information is there, so you can get in touch. So that would be very welcome. And I just wanted to say a word about the slides. If you did download them or you've got them up on your screen, you're going to find that we subtracted a few out because we realized there might be quite a bit of discussion and wanted to leave as much time as we can for that. So if you notice you have a slide and haven't put it up on the screen and we're not talking about it, nothing went wrong. And there is even some elaboration of each of those slides in the handout that looks like a chart with some orange bars at the top, and there are additional resources listed in that handout. And I know only a few people can even see what I'm holding, but it is your second handout in the packet of handouts. Okay, so let's start looking at some of these questions that can come up about who is doing what and what is the difference between reflective supervision and coaching. We came in as a group, both those who are listening and watching from a distance and those who are here, pretty clear that there are differences and distinctions. And that's a great starting place for this conversation. Let's look first at some of the commonalities between the two. I think that both, and I think this is very fundamental importance, are relationship-based approaches to supporting staff. And so they share a commitment to the principles of relationship-based work, and I'll just quickly say what these are. Then these are based on the work of Judy Bertocchi, who wrote an article on relationship-based organizations in 1996 that I think is still a wonderful reference. And so those principles include the idea of collaboration, working together to identify goals. And we heard Heath talking about that when he was talking about developing buy-in and the importance of taking time for everybody to grapple with the questions and understand the meaning of making this change to them in their work. Okay. And coming up with mutual definitions to work from, because those aren't just definitions, right? They help us make decisions about who's getting what kind of support and when, and what we're trying to do. Communication is important in terms of everyone is free to share their thoughts and ideas. It's safe, and it doesn't matter where you are in the hierarchy. That's not it. You're a person, you have a point of view, you have things to share and experiences that are important. So open communication, being aware of context, all of those things. Context is a great big idea. All of those things that affect how we feel, how we act, what we think, that can have to do with what we bring with us, as Heath described really well, that can cause us to have particular reactions. It can have to do with our physical surroundings and circumstances, where we work, where we're finding ourselves, what the culture of our organization is, the influences that come from our communities, from society, from who we are in our societies, and the interactive experiences we have based on, our racial background, our own cultural background, our sexual orientation, all those things that can make a difference in how people respond to us and the experiences we have. We can't know everything about all of that for each person, but we can be aware those things have influences. Respect for the varied perspectives and points of views and value systems that people bring. A commitment to ongoing learning and growth. So this is sort of bringing echoes of what Heath was saying as I talk about this, to doing our best, to always improving. A commitment to reflective practice, to carving out the time, as hard as it is to do, to slow down, to step back a little bit, and to think together with somebody else about the work and what we're learning from it, and to high professional standards. And those high professional standards can be everything from maintaining ethical standards to the standards of the professions we're members of, and to just doing a darn good job, doing the best we can all the time.
Nancy, Nancy, I just want to add to the commitment. One thing that we practice is if someone says, "Oh, I don't have time for supervision this month, I'm just too busy," that's usually a key indicator that it is time to slow down, and maybe not in that moment, and you might want to honor the employee to say, "Okay, let's reschedule, but let's reschedule for soon, not next month, but for the next day, or at a minimum the next week," because it is an indicator that it is time to stop and really think about what's happening and how we can reflect upon the work that's happening.
I think that's really important. Thank you. And, there are some shared competencies, and that might get to that last comment we heard, that there are some shared competencies among people who provide reflective supervision and people who provide coaching. Being able to sit back and wait a bit for the other to find their own solutions is one of them. It's easy to want to jump in and fix or give advice or start teaching, and sometimes people gain more when we can give that time. Being a good listener, really being able to hear the spoken and unspoken messages and be active about it, clarifying, using the powerful questions that we gave the guide to help in the listening process. Being self-aware. What's coming up in me and why? Where is that coming from? And how am I impacting other people? Being aware of others' feelings, being able to empathize with those feelings even when we haven't shared the exact same experiences. Being able to encourage reflection, and being able to build a relationship in which people feel safe, because whether you're exploring what's going on inside you or the impact of your past and what's getting triggered as a result, or whether you're opening up and saying, there's something here I don't know, I need to learn more about, and being able to say that and make yourself vulnerable requires a relationship that supports you and that you feel okay in. Heath was talking before about checking the boxes, and that can be a real function of supervision. Supervisors have a pretty broad role, don't they? And this is where we're going to start getting into some of the distinctions between the two roles. And maybe this will be helpful for those that are moving one role into another or adopting new responsibilities. But supervisors have these three broad areas that I think about that they're responsible for over time with all the people they supervise. Administrative things, making sure policies, procedures, and practices are being followed as they should, and taking care of needed paperwork and reporting. Those kinds of things are administrative responsibilities. And then there's what can be called clinical responsibilities, and that might have to do with just all those routines that we follow to make sure that the things that are supposed to be happening for children and families indeed are. So that might have to do with making assessments, coming up with curriculum to respond or family service plans to respond, making sure referrals are getting made and followed up as needed, those sorts of things. And there may be some teaching and guiding that happens in the course of helping assure that all these client and case management things are happening. And then there's the reflective aspect that I think we've heard about, and has to do really with understanding how one relationship influences another, and learning to use that in order to purposely work toward the outcomes you want to get for children and for families. So that reflective supervision relationship in itself can be a model and an example of the kind of relationship we're encouraging our staff members to establish with children and their families. And so the relationship and understanding it, being a part of it, that's very central to reflective supervision. Now, in reality, you don't sit down with someone and say, okay, let's do administrative supervision now, and now let's do reflective supervision. In reality, I think we integrate all these things, because actually, if something's not happening according to policies or rules that we all know are part, like you have to show up for work on time, there may be something to reflect on to understand what's happening that's getting in the way. And there may be something to reflect on even when you're implementing an approach to correcting a difficulty in somebody's performance. Okay? Making sense? Okay. So, broad scope of responsibilities and delivering a support in terms of reflective supervision that you get from the day you walk in the door till the day you leave. It's not about how expert or experienced you are. Our interpersonal issues still resonate with us, and recognizing them, being aware of them, improving our ability to regulate our behavior in a deep way that's related to changes in us as we're developing and growing ourselves is an ongoing need. Coaching can be thought of also as having three aspects, and they're all focused around the function of learning. Okay, so coaching can be implemented to help with transfer of learning. Heath mentioned that. There's research that says if you go to a class or a workshop, you're going to get a lot more benefit from it in terms of tangible changes in behavior if somebody can coach you in addressing the real-life issues that come up as you work to implement it. Just-in-time learning can be a part of coaching too. When somebody just runs into wow, I have a kid that like throws tantrums all day long in the classroom, and I'm so tied up at trying to attend to him, but nothing's helping. I need help with this, just-in-time help. And then fidelity to standards. So suppose you're implementing an evidence-based model-like class. You might need some help with someone standing by your side helping you implement the practices as intended. So that would be an example. So a coach might do all these things, or coaching might be put in place in order to help with one of these things. Okay? Very much more focused on the learning and skill building aspects. And while a relationship is important, the importance of it here, I think, is to support that learning and skill building and increase in competence and confidence. Make sense? Questions? Any questions about this or comments?
We have a question requesting more information about the clinical.
Okay.
And there's no specifics. They just ask for more.
Okay.
More about it.
Well, I'll say a couple things and hope that it gets at your question. And if somehow it didn't, I do invite you to email with any further questions or clarifications. So there's a range of things in terms of clinical responsibilities we want to pay attention to. And some of the words on this slide might relate more to mental health programs, and some might relate a little more to programs that are delivering early childhood education and care services. So there might be the idea, for example, that when someone comes in, one of the first things that happens is you get to know them and their strengths and their needs. So we want to make sure that that assessment happens with every child and with every parent in whatever way you do that in your program. There might be then developing how you respond to supporting those strengths and building on them and addressing areas of need that are identified. So that could be the intervention, although that might not be the term you're using in your program at all. It might be more like, well, what's going to be the curriculum for this infant? Okay? How are we individualizing? Where are they developmentally? What's the next step we want to scaffold? Okay, so that would be a clinical, part of the clinical service to the child. For the family, it might be, we have a family where they've acknowledged that sometimes things get scary between the partners and they want to get some help and counseling and maybe make sure that nothing violent happens. So how are we going to help them get connected with the supports that will help? So those are some examples. And so you have a plan, and you spend some time reviewing that plan and seeing what kind of progress is being made or if any changes need to be made. When do you go back and assess again? Okay, that might happen at routine times. So those are some examples of the clinical aspects of the work. And hopefully that is helpful with that question. And again, if there's further questions, I don't know if we'll get to all of that right now, but very much welcome using the email address you have to ask further questions. Anything else?
Nancy, I just want to add that some programs have a model of case conferencing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our program, we case conference on every single child, every family 2 times a year. And this is an opportunity to really look at the individual and to think about individualization for what's happening in the classroom for the child and or what's the learning that's happening and what's happening for the family and the child's health as well. Mm-hmm. So that's one model that some programs use to ensure that you're really focusing on the clinical aspect.
Mm-hmm. And that's a way, too, to assure some program-wide consistency in thinking and approaches. So that's a great example.
Thank you. Heath, can I ask you a clarifying question, please? Do all the staff have an administrative supervisor and a reflective supervisor, and just some have a coach?
Yes. Yes, so I just want to be clear that the administrative supervisor is the same as the reflective supervisor, so we're really blending those responsibilities that are up on the screen. And then, yes, at this point, we have one coach for education or early intervention who's going to work with 8 to 10 people. And then we have a part-time coach who's working on the family services side. So really thinking about our work with families. And that person is part-time right now, so we'll probably work with 4 to 5 people on the average.
Okay, let's take another question here. Oh, our mic was temporarily outside the room.
How long does it take for someone to be trained to offer reflective supervision? And is there a certain background that's better fitted to be in reflective supervision?
Boy, that's a really good question. I don't know that I could give you how long does it take, because it kind of depends on the starting point. But when people are newly learning it and getting ready to implement it, when I've worked with them, it's been a process taking place over at least a year, combining training and individual consultation. You can certainly provide workshop and initial, and people who are reflective supervisors here probably could find you afterwards and talk about some of their experiences with how they learned. Sometimes people even learn on the job from the experience of being supervised by someone who knows reflective supervision and who purposefully shares, the strategies and how they decide what they're doing. So there probably aren't courses, or at least if there are, I haven't really seen courses people sign up for this. Can anybody do it? I think that you need to look for certain characteristics, like we were talking about these competencies. Are they there? This is examples, because there are other competencies as well. But are they there, or are they there strongly enough that they can be built upon and expanded upon? Is it a matter of what kind of degree you have? I think no. Because I think at its heart, reflective supervision is a relationship in which one person slows down to be there and to be present for the other, and without fear will open up areas to discuss. Now, we all have our limits, right? And we have to operate within them. So if I feel like someone's starting to share something with me and I am at a loss where to go with it, and that can happen. I mean, can be fairly comfortable with my counseling background. People can bring up things, and it's stuff I know what to do with. And I'm not providing therapy and supervision, by the way, but we can talk about this issue and how it's impacting their work. But something could come up that you feel overwhelmed by, right? And to be able to say, that's really important. I'm actually not sure how best to help you with that, but let's see if we can figure out where you can get help. So to know when you want to ask someone to find another source of help, I think, is an important competency. Given that, I think everyone can learn how to use powerful questions, how to establish a safe and trusting relationship, and how to help people increase their self-awareness and their empathy with others. And so you supervise, I think, from who you are and what your competencies are. And so how Heath delivers reflective supervision and how I deliver it might look a little different in some ways, and yet be based on the same practices and principles.
Nancy, I just want to comment. I, too, don't think there's a magic number. I think the best experiences that I've had have been when it's been modeled or role modeled for me. And so when I've had a supervisor who has truly been able to offer self-reflection and ask those questions in those moments, that's when I'm saying, you know what, I want to answer them and I want to think through my experience, but that's a question I want to be able to ask someone when I get asked a very similar question from a supervisee. I've been practicing reflective supervision both as a supervisee and a supervisor for over 15 years, and I'm still learning every day. It's not perfect. Sometimes I might not ask the best questions. Sometimes I may be having a bad day on my own, but it's constant learning, and I'm self-improvement, and I feel like each day I'm trying to become a better supervisor, but I'm not sure there's a magic number to say, yep, after 15 years you're going to truly get this.
So in some ways it is a process, just as being the best practitioner is a process too. And so these are some definitions I'm just putting forward for consideration. And I think one of the importances of this is to clarify the distinctions, even if one person is delivering both. You kind of know what you're doing and why and what strategies you're using as why. Reflective supervision, I think most importantly, revolving around that relationship building that happens and the learning that happens and the understanding that what happens in one relationship can powerfully influence others. Heath kind of talked about the importance at the organizational level of having relationships that are the kind we want our supervisors to build with our staff, right? And that we want our staff to build with our families. So the commitment to reflective supervision begins at the leadership level and is implemented by staff. And coaching revolves around the idea of helping people learn and do their best and gain confidence and skills, not only for applying to the problem or question at hand, but for carrying a process forward to help with learning when new problems arise, including recognizing when to ask for help.
Nancy, I just want to comment on the supervision aspect, and that it takes buy-in, and it's not something that a supervisor does to a supervisee.
That's right.
And that it really takes buy-in of both parties to come to the table and a willingness to really reflect upon the work. And I can remember when you came and did our training with our staff, there was a young teacher who stood up and said, I'm not too sure about this. You're asking me to do something I'm not sure I'm really comfortable with, and I've never done this before, and I'm not even sure I want to do this with someone. And I commended her for having an openness to even just expressing herself and her feelings, because that's the first step, is being able to share, here's where I'm at. Now, in the end, she may decide that this is not for her, and she may find herself in a place of saying, okay, I'm no longer a match for this organization if this is the value of the organization. But there is an opportunity for her to figure out, is this something I really want? And I'm hopeful that she, through the process, is able to say, this is a value to me moving forward, and is something I really want to have as a part of my work experience.
And I would say, too, then, that when you talk about, that kind of highlights the collaboration idea in relationship-based work, and also points out that the starting place has to do with where the supervisee is and where the coachee is as well for coaching. So if there's not much trust yet and not so, I don't know, why would I want you in my business, I don't know about this, that you may spend a good amount of time establishing trust before you're able to go deeper, and that would be one of the skills of a reflective supervisor and could be also an important skill for a coach. And I think that we've talked about this central purpose in terms of building capacity and competence through coaching and improving practice. So that's a broad overall central purpose, very much focused on abilities to manage what comes at us through these intense relationships we're involved in. And coaching's central purpose focuses on learning, competency building, and knowledge building. Okay. We can think of key elements in reflective supervision. Well, reflection is one. They call it reflective supervision, so how about that? So the time to look at and learn from experience, and the encouragement and support to do it, working together in a mutual way, and meeting regularly, okay, as regularly as possible. Coaching involves the elements of joint planning, working together to identify a goal, and then decide who's going to do what in furtherance of that goal between each session. And observation. Heath talked about using observation of the coachee. The coachee might want to observe the coach at times too, to get an idea of how something is done. Reflection, and here we're talking not so much about reflection on relationships and what's going on inside me, but reflection on what I did, what happened, how it worked, and anything I might want to change or add. Okay? And taking action, and then providing feedback, whether it's affirming and just saying, yes, I heard you, I understand, or whether it's positive, look how well that worked, I'm so excited about this. So providing feedback to support the efforts to move forward. So we talked about providing a bit of demonstration. Somebody asked for that from our participating audience. We have 10 minutes remaining. We can't stay for another hour, huh? So, okay. I think what we'll be able to demonstrate is just the very opening, how we might begin to open up the conversation and how that might look a little bit different, opening up a coaching conversation, and how that might look, how it might look there and how supervision might look a little different, okay? So, are we ready for that? Heath, are we ready?
I was just going to ask, are we going to do example 1 or 2?
Example 1 is the biting one?
Yes.
We can, what do you prefer?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, quick reflection. Okay, why don't we use example, the home visiting example, because
Okay.
I think people really resonated when you brought those up.
Okay. Okay, so in this role model, I'm going to be the home visitor, and Nancy at the moment is going to be the supervisor.
Thanks.
And so I am sharing with...
It's okay to do? Okay.
Thank you. Nancy, I was on a home visit the other day, and I was mortified. I walked into the building, and it smelled like urine. There was trash in the entryway, and I'm not really sure if I need to make a report here to Child Protective or not. But then when I knocked on the door, to my surprise, Mom answered the door very friendly, and her apartment is really clean and organized and very different than the entryway. And I don't know how I can help support this mom in this situation because they have to walk through that every day.
So this experience really just stirred up a lot.
Yeah, I feel really uncomfortable with it. I mean, I can't imagine having to walk through that every day to get to my apartment.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it left you really thinking about this and wondering, putting yourself in the place of that mother and thinking, what if I had to come home to this every day?
Yeah, and can I ask her about it? Should I not ask her about it? What do you think?
Okay. So I'm going to stop at this point. I'm actually dying to go on. I hate to stop. But you can see that what we began doing here, okay, had to do with what happened to Heath when he got in this situation. He had a powerful experience. That could be an overwhelming experience, okay? And actually, it was based on, we were sharing stories with each other yesterday, actually, and getting ready, and it was based on something I went through where my kids were the same age as this mother's, and when I went home, I kept flashing back. I'd look at my kids and picture them walking through that building, or what if it was me every day having to try to protect my children and keep them safe in that environment. So it rocked me. It really did. Okay, so that was a supervisory demo.
Yeah.
Let's...
One thing I just want to reflect upon is, if you notice, it could have been easy for Nancy to provide judgment. Oh my God, I can't believe that. It could have been easy for her to say, yeah, we should make a report, to immediately jump to those places, but she didn't. She stopped, and she really spent some time really trying to focus on how it felt for me, what it was like for me as the employee. What am I experiencing going through that, to really reflect upon my own feelings of the situation.
So good, that's pointing out that we're going to get to that clinical or case management part, because that's an important issue. It would not be ignored, but it's not necessarily the starting place. Okay. So let's just see if we can approach this really challenging situation from a coaching perspective, where the coach's role is very different, isn't it? And suppose Heath just described the same thing to me. Okay, so I'm going to give this a shot, and those of you who are coaches may have a couple of ideas to share about where you might go with it. There's probably 100 right ways, or at least more than one. And so let's just see. Is it okay if we proceed? We know the story, and we just start with the coaching? Okay. So... So this is your second time meeting with this mother. Can you let's think together about the goals that you established with her for working together?
So in my first meeting with Mom, I learned that she just started a new job, and her goal is to really be able to get to work on time. And she's concerned about that because she has to be to work at 8:15, but her childcare provider only opens the door at 8 o'clock. And for her, she's nervous about that time frame, and so her goal is to get to work on time.
Okay. Okay, so do you see that as a goal that you and she can approach at this point? Is it one that you feel you saw her able to start taking some steps about? Were you able to take any steps from your last time to this time?
So we brainstormed several different options, and Mom really wanted to take some time to think about some different options. So, for instance, one of the options that we talked about is she has a neighbor who uses the same child care provider, and was there an ability for them to share roles where one could drop off the children and one could pick up the children at the end of the day. That was something that Mom thought of on her own. The other is she thought about talking with her employer to find out, to explain the situation and to find out what are the requirements and what happens if she doesn't show up till 8:20, so that it's open and that she's being open and honest with her employer from the beginning.
So I guess I have two thoughts. I mean, I'm excited to hear that she made that much progress already. What a great start.
She's very open to really thinking through it and trying to think through some of the challenges as well as some of the solutions.
So many competencies that I'm sure you pointed out to her, that she did a lot there and showed a lot of ability.
I'm sure I did, actually.
Oh, okay. So that's something to think about, too. And I can see, from what you said, how much was going on and how it might have been hard to remember to do that. So in terms of you and I thinking about your goals for next time, maybe we can identify some of those things you can do to keep supporting the mother's strengths. I also want to say I really noticed what you said about how hard it was to go into that building and what you encountered there. And probably in coaching isn't the best place to really get into that, but I'm wondering who you have that you can talk with here about what all that felt like and how it affected you, because I think that's really important.
Well, I've reached out to one of my coworkers who's been a mentor of mine to ask her if she's ever encountered this same situation, and I'm really thinking about talking to my supervisor about that as well.
And so maybe those two steps could be part of the goals and action steps that we put in place in your plan, is having some identified things you can do when something really powerfully affects you like that and is important to be able to talk about. That sounds great. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. I'm just saying that so everyone knows that if we start talking twice as fast, there's a reason. But I just wanted to see if that helped sort of bring to life some of those distinctions we were talking about. Did it leave you, did you think, oh my God, what is she doing? Do you disagree with anything that happened? Anyone have a suggestion or comment? It's okay to have that even though we're near the end. Yes, I need to bring you a mic though. I suddenly realized I can't ask someone else to do that because we're holding both of them.
I've been a coach and a mentor, and sometimes it would help in this situation for me is to write my questions ahead of time, because that would lead me to the goal or the action steps. So while I was listening to both of you, I would just for me and my scripts at the back of my head, I might want to ask, what I'm hearing you say is that Mom already has other options for her to get to her job on time. What do you think would be the next step for her? I mean, for me to clarify it with my mentee, it would be a little bit shorter, because the answer I might want to be getting for myself for documentation purposes is something short too.
That's beautiful. That was a good addition. And I bet you many of you who work in coaching or supervision have some additional places that you would go. Actually, I was almost in you can't tell what people are thinking when you're watching them, but I had like oh my God, which way should I go here? I have about 2 minutes. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's an excellent strategy.
Nancy, what I think is important in the coaching is to bring it back to the goal. And, so here I was talking about this particular situation, but you pointed out that, we didn't say this from the beginning, but the goal here in this relationship is to really work on me as the employee. How am I supporting families and pointing out their strengths? And you really brought it back to that, as well as said, okay, but here's the boundary, and I noticed these other things, but here's where are you going to take that to? Where are you going to get that support for your feelings around this?
Mm-hmm. Just want to add too, it's a self-reflection on my part too, because I'm becoming to know my adult learning style myself. So I think that's where I'm leading to, and sometimes it kind of helps me to go back and pause a little bit and see, okay, this is not my style, but let me go this way.
Okay. So that kind of writing and thinking about what is it and where am I going is good for self-awareness, self-reflection, and your own growth in your role. Donna?
These are wrap-up questions, I
Okay.
think. One of them is, do you have any research showing the impact on staff turnover? Have you done any digging to see if there's any research on that?
That's very hard to find in the nonprofit arena. I have found there is research documenting some of this in the for-profit sector in terms of increased staff engagement and decreased turnover, and also better outcomes in that arena, which translates in the end to profits made. So there is some researching demonstrating supportive supervision makes a really big difference. And this is something our field is working on taking up, and there are efforts connected with 0 to 3 to help move that research forward, and is something we very much need. So if anyone is looking for a project, thank you for the question. Is there another one?
There is.
We have about 1 more minute.
Seth, how are the coaches and supervisors chosen? Are they self-selection to influence buy-in, or are they assigned?
So, like I said, we have one coach for education and early intervention. So, in our situation, it's not. But I do think that you really have to think about the right match and the right fit between two people. And that's the same thing goes for our supervisor-supervisee relationship. And we often talk about that, particularly if we're going to change supervisors or do any sort of restructuring. I also, sorry, I'm just spacing exactly what you just said before. The research. Yeah. The agency I worked for before I went to 0 to 3, one of the top things that employees valued about the agency was reflective supervision. And so that was something that came out in surveys. So it's not necessarily research-based, but every year we did an annual survey about employee satisfaction of their job, and that was one of always the top-rated thing that employees valued about the work.
So in closing, we had a couple of comments and some discussion about getting buy-in. We've provided you with a couple of tools to help you with that if that's a process that you would like to take up in your work. One is this empathy map, which actually can be used for many, many purposes, but one can be for gathering people, let's say a team that's planning implementation, to say, let's see if we can kind of put ourselves in the place of our staff members and identify what kinds of things they think about, they see, they do, they feel, they hear every day. To use those to help us think about how are they likely to react and respond. So this is a reflective activity and discussion that you can lead with your team to help in planning how are we going to introduce this, how are we going to open up the discussions. To follow that up, we've provided a discussion guide that you can download that lists a number of questions to open up the thinking about, well, what do we mean here by supervision and reflective supervision? What do we mean by coaching? What could we expect it to do? What questions do we have? So there's a good number of discussion questions. It's not a process for implementation that we gave you because we believe you could use this to surface the kinds of things that would help you decide upon your process. We think using this could be part of, these two tools could be part of that year of preparation that Heath was talking about. And it seems amazing to think about taking that long to introduce something new. But, you know, when you think about the organization using a reflective and relationship-based process to introduce these supports, it makes total sense. So, we did a lot, right? Deep breath, everybody. First thing in the morning, we jumped in and really got going. And that's really all due to everybody who is participating, our virtual audience, our in-person audience, and your great comments and questions. Would have loved to get to every single one of them. So very happy to have you approach us here or to get in touch with us later. Thank you so much, and go on to have a great closing of the conference and a great trip home.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.